Hi again everybody and welcome to my wormery. Today's focus is going to be on my two finishing bins is what I'm referring to them as. When I say finishing bin, what I'm referring to is a bin that I've placed my quote-unquote finished compost into, my vermicompost. And the idea is that it's been, for the most part, completed, and the only thing remaining is the depopulation of any worms that may have straggled into the material, as well as allowing some time for the worms that have yet to hatch and to also depopulate the material. So it was 5 days ago that I set up these little milk cartons, have holes around them, and the idea was that if there's worms in the material, that they're going to sense the food in these, and that they're going to make their way into the into this little bait bomb. I'm referring to it as sort of like a lure, if you will. So I was just curious to see how they're progressing, and if there are any worms, then maybe just move them out, place them into one of my active worm bins, and then replenish the food to make sure it's topped off and amply fed. So let's get these bins onto the bench, and we'll take a look at how they're coming along. So this first of the two bins is a little different from the other bin. This bin, very little effort was taken to make sure that the worms were not in the compost. So all I really did when I harvested that bin was I sifted this material so I could remove any sort of large uncomposted food items, and then the material all went right into here, and chances are a lot of worms snuck by the sieve, the screening process that I employed, and I'm almost certain that this thing is chock full of eggs, cocoons if you will, that are probably going to be hatching in the next few weeks. So monitoring the progress of this bin over the next few weeks is going to be key. So we'll check in periodically, but this will be the first check-in after 5 days. All I want to really do here is kind of empty it gently, just so we can get a good look at how things are progressing. I've got another tray here. We'll simply turn it upside down. Put that right back where it came from. And right away we can already see a number of worms. They're already fleeing from the bright light. So what I'm going to try to do is separate the worms from the material here. Start loading it back into the box. Every time I encounter a little worm in here, I'm just going to go ahead and try to knock them off before I put that object back into the bait box. Now, this is cabbage, so it does have a pretty pungent odor to it, I must say. And you know, I'm not being very orderly here because I'm sort of making this up as I go. But if the object was to keep the worms off on the side, I'm not doing a very good job of it. They keep trying to flee the bright light. Or well, you know what, why don't I just give them a little something that they're maybe a little more comfortable underneath, some leaves or something, just so they're not trying to run away. First time I've tried doing it this way. So for me, usually stuff like this is a learning experience. But let's see, as we encounter stuff that's pretty much worm free, I guess it's best just to start moving it right back over into the bait box. If we're able to snag a worm or two as we go and get them over here with their buddies, then that's kind of what we're after here. I gotta tell you, this cabbage stinks. But it's definitely breaking down nicely. I can imagine that for the worms, it's awesome. And I guess the fact that it's pungent is probably a good thing as well, because it's kind of advertising to the worms in the bin that there's food nearby. Presumably they can somehow sense that or smell it or whatever. Get some more leaves back into this bin. What's here? This cucumber almost feels like mush, but it still has kind of some body to it, so it's not completely mush yet. Let's get that back in here. So there's a lot of little tiny worms here, for sure, which makes sense. Totally makes sense that there's little tiny worms in here, because it's the little tiny worms that would have gone through the sifting process along with the compost. So why don't we call that done? I don't think I see any other worms in here, but then again, we're not shooting for 100% perfection here. We're just trying to get a sense of how this whole baiting process is progressing, if at all, and I think it's working. So I've got to admit that it's doing okay. No reason to complain. I guess we'll just leave these worms in here momentarily while we finish off with this bin. Just make sure they're all in a place where they can flee from the bright light. I guess what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab a bunch of cucumber peelings, drop them in here. Here's some banana peel. One more piece of banana peel. Very nice. And then we'll just go ahead and we'll start placing this leafy matter back on top. This is pretty much doing what I had hoped. And why don't we wrap this thing up and get the other bin out here and give it the similar treatment. We'll start with the fresh box here. Perhaps just to empty some stuff that we know is just going to go back in as is, and then we'll get that, maybe we'll get that other box to pick through stuff to make it easier. Let's just get some of the leafy matter out of this one. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab this tray that has the worms on it already and plop it out just so we can keep everything together. So down in here I do see a couple worms hanging out, little ones. Introduce them to their partners or their friends over there. Okay, so we'll do the same thing here. If we see any worms, we'll try to round them up. This looks like a millipede, which is fine. They're not going to cause any trouble. Let's start out by putting the cardboard down at the bottom as sort of a bedding material. There's one. Just like the other one, this cabbage is definitely getting stinky. Putting out the calling card for the worms to come and get it. Oh, here's some more cardboard, so why don't we continue putting that at the bottom as a bedding type of a material. Cardboard. And I don't see any worms hanging out on it. So, like I mentioned earlier, I think that's sort of to be expected because of the nature of how this worm bin was set up as opposed to the one we did earlier. So why don't we get this one reloaded the way it was. We'll put a few more savory bits of food in here on top. There's some more maybe cabbage or lettuce leaves. Some more cucumber peelings. We'll give this one the same treatment with a banana peel. Maybe a second piece of banana peel. And then we'll get all this leafy material right back in on top. We'll cover up. Let me get this out of the way, and what we can do now, just grab this latest bin that we have here, which is also now 5 days old. It was set up on the same day that we harvested those bins that the vermicompost came out of. And we're going to make this into the new home for our little friends that are being relocated. Drop them in here and let them get back to work for us. Certainly not many, just a little jumble of them. They kind of congregated together there to try to get away from the light, keep each other company. And let me just make sure I didn't miss any here. Here's one little guy, straggler, but I think we got all of them. Alrighty, so we'll just cover up here and that's pretty much it. So maybe I'll go another week or 10 days before I check in on these again. And by then, hopefully, at least in the other bin, we'll probably see a fair number of more worms in there. And I'll be really curious to see how the how things progress with the second one that really is mostly there to allow cocoons to hatch and for those baby worms to make their way out of the compost. So now that everything's up on the shelf again, I had this idea that maybe I can do a little bit more to try to preserve whatever moisture's in these bins. So what I did was I simply stacked bin number 2 on top of bin number 1 on top of the cardboard that's covering up everything underneath. And then what I did was what you might have seen me do in the past, which is sort of set up this terrarium effect so as to keep any sort of moisture that might want to evaporate out of the bin inside. So my hope is that by doing it this way, it'll permit the compost to stay a little bit more moist, a little bit more comfortable for the worms, and not dry out prematurely. So this is where we're going to leave it for now, and we'll revisit it maybe in another week or 10 days, and we'll see how things look then. So thanks for watching, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. I always appreciate that. Think about signing up for my channel too. And we'll see you next time. All right, bye now.